The Psychom Collective acknowledges the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the lands we study, write and record on, and that their sovereignty was never ceded. Hello and welcome to the Psychom Collective.
Different useful knowledge in different areas.
The joy is sharing it.
Making science accessible.
The ignored final step of the scientific method.
Every different perspective.
Science is culture.
The Psychom Collective, bringing science and science communication to you.
Welcome back to the Psychom Collective. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm here with Tom Carbery.
I am Tom. I'm a third-year psychology student. Doing SCOM gave me an opportunity to kind of communicate a little bit more creatively than I would in the classroom sort of thing.
And we've been talking to students in this series all about the podcast episode that you created. And you just said like that it was an opportunity to be creative, but also bring in what you're interested in.
So I was able to do a podcast about self-handicapping, which was kind of a topic of great interest to me.
Self-handicapping, what is that?
It's basically, I came across it when I was reading the textbook, and it's quite a boring chapter, but that really stood out to me as just something that you can kind of relate to a lot of people you know personally. Like, it's basically taking on maladaptive strategies to kind of harm your own achievement on purpose in order to have an excuse for failure almost. And the examples they gave out about, students, nightclubs instead of studying for exams and, eating unhealthily when they've got like a fitness test coming up, they kind of stood out to me because I've got a few friends that kind of confuse me, as in they like to, that's when they'll start their going out is during exam periods. And it always confused me until I read that and I went, oh, hang on, that kind of makes sense.
Very cool. So what would you want our audience to know about after they've listened to this episode?
I guess in terms kind of the stresses and anxieties that would surround assessments, and I guess the psychology behind like maladaptive coping strategies with academics, and then I guess how to manage them in order to reduce the anxiety around it.
All right, well then we're going to listen to your episode and then we're going to get into all about the decisions that you made for it, because I think that they're really interesting and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, great. Sounds good.
Ever notice yourself or others staying up late and procrastinating before your exams? It's not laziness, it's actually psychology. Welcome to the Student Mind podcast, where we bring the world of psychology to high schoolers without the jargon. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're joined by social psychologist Dr. Robert Clark. So tell me, what does the term self-handicapping actually mean? Well, self-handicapping refers to the tendency to engage in self-sabotaging behaviours before an event, so that an excuse is immediately ready should we fail. This way, we can prevent others from potentially making negative judgments about our abilities. That makes a lot of sense, but I wonder how common this actually is. We asked some ATAR students the question, what does a realistic week before exams look like for you?
Honestly, a lot of social media. I guess I use it to relax for a bit, and before I know it, I've spent hours scrolling when I could have been studying.
I end up hanging out with my mates a lot in the lead up to exams. We try to study together, but just end up talking most of the time, to be honest.
Well, without classes during exam week, I'll take on extra basketball training. It's great to stay active, but I'm usually just too exhausted to study afterwards.
It seems like all these students are falling into the same trap. Is this something you see a lot of? Yes, self-handicapping is actually very common, and most people don't even realise they do it. But it's not just academics. Many people overcommit themselves. Even athletes sometimes turn to drugs or alcohol leading up to a game. The key is always the active creation of an excuse for underperformance. Fascinating. I can definitely think of a few people that seem to be affected by this process. But is there any scientific evidence behind it? Of course. In a famous study by Burgess and Jones, student participants were given an intellectual performance test and a choice of taking one of two pills. One to enhance performance and the other to diminish performance. However, They were both placebo treatments and had no real effects. Now, the interesting finding here is that those who felt they were likely to fail the test voluntarily chose to take the pill that they believed would inhibit their performance. But logically, wouldn't you want to do everything possible to maximize your chances of success? Ideally, yes. However, it seems here that they would rather have an available excuse for failure rather than to try to succeed and have nothing to fall back on. Okay, so if this problem is so common, is there anything we can do to prevent it? Well, yes. Since self-handicapping is about protecting yourself from judgment, people with low self-esteem seem to be the most vulnerable. So, one proven strategy is self-affirmation. Basically, this is taking the time to reflect on values that are important to you. In fact, research has found that when students wrote about their personal values before a test, they were much less likely to self-sabotage. So, next time you find yourself avoiding the work you should be doing, remember, your values hold the key to success. Thank you to Dr. Robert Clark for joining us on the Student Mind podcast, and as always, stay curious.
That was so cool.
Thanks.
Thank you for being on today and sharing this with us. I completely agree with what you said before, that I know myself or I know other people who have exhibited those behaviors. And it all came from reading a boring page in a psychology textbook that you went, oh, hey, maybe this isn't boring after all.
Not correct. Yeah. It kind of jumped out the page almost.
That's really cool. Okay, so why did you aim this then at ATAR students?
I noticed a lot of news segments as well as like newspaper articles kind of concerning, I guess, students' mental health in ATAR, and a lot of universities deciding to scrap ATAR requirements kind of amidst all the mental health pressures and that with students. So I thought, why not focus on them as a target audience?
Yeah. And of course, that was you as the doctor?
Yeah. No doubt.
What made you decide to basically role play in the podcast?
Yeah, well, I guess, I could have got somebody else to come and sit with me and do it, but it doesn't give you enough flexibility. And, nobody really wants to sit in your mom's closet for like 4 hours and sort of play around with it. So I thought it might be easier just to do it myself. And I did consider doing like a solo podcast, but it's not something I'm really familiar with. Like, I only ever listened to podcasts where they're having a guest, like, the Huberman podcast and shows like that. But I thought I'll stick with what's, I guess, familiar to me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So were the other people that you had on there, were they teenagers?
No, they were AI voices. That was me again, just using an AI voice changer.
No way.
Yeah. So I try to make it as different as I could. Yeah, I would have done it for the doctor as well, but I think we had some requirements that it couldn't all be, voice changed. So I thought I may as well use it there.
That's really cool. And wow, what a thing. That's making my brain go in all kinds of directions. But the people's voices that you chose, they sounded young.
Yeah.
Was any of this part of your approach to be doing this for the audience that you were aiming this at?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would say I kind of frame them as being younger high school students, so I can sort of, make it more relatable to them as an audience.
Yeah, I know that, like, if my parents came and said to me, like, oh, you're doing self-handicapping, then I probably just would ignore them. So
100%.
Yeah.
So I guess, if it came from a familiar sort of age bracket, then it's more relatable, I guess.
Do you ever worry that maybe naming this behavior might actually make your listeners feel a bit judged though?
Not particularly. Obviously it's always a risk, having a label, but I guess having the study there at the end, you like to always have a bit of evidence for everything, obviously, in science. So having that Burgess and Jones classic study sort of shows how common it kind of is. I think in that study, it was like nearly the majority of people who thought they were going to fail ended up engaging in it. So it was kind of that I integrated that to sort of show that it was a very common thing that we all do time to time, you know?
Did you ever think about doing the whole concept differently?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100. I was thinking of a good few ideas, especially the solo pod, like informational podcast, but I just didn't think it would come across as authentic as a person to person conversation with a so-called expert would. I don't know. It wouldn't be, I wouldn't find it personally as engaging as listening to a so-called like natural conversation.
It's really interesting how you say that. I think that's one of the things we think about in science communication is who is telling the story and why that person is the right person to tell the story. And whether the audience is going to, yes, trust them, but also maybe engage with them. Like, I like how you chose different voices to represent young people that might be listening to go, oh yeah, this is someone like me. Do you think that maybe having the professor there was part of your like authority figure?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's obviously good to have a credible voice or so to say in there. So it's good to have a reliable source of information rather than, just hearing it off of someone else you wouldn't really see as that.
So could you push it further, do you think? Or
I would have loved to be able to make the professor or whatever have the AI voice. I think that would have made it even more natural, but I didn't want to have it. I think there was limitations around AI use and stuff, so I didn't want to overdo it, but I definitely would play around with that. And, having more time as well, I could even try it with actual people, but a part about that as well was I was scared of, if I was interviewing friends at uni and stuff, having different backgrounds in all of the clips. I didn't want them to take away from the message sort of thing.
So you were thinking as well about where you were filming it or recording it?
100%. Yeah, I really underestimated how much background noise there was like everywhere. Even when I thought it was silent, there'd always be something, whether that be like, something in the background or even me rustling my feet. I couldn't believe how many things there was to look out for. It drove me nuts, but we got there in the end.
Was there a lot of edit time?
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I thought most of the time would be doing the script and the ideas. I severely underestimated how much editing there was to do. That was probably a majority of it.
Yeah. Things we learn, isn't it, as we do?
Correct. Yeah, it was a learning experience, but it wasn't a short one.
Would you do it again?
100%. Yeah, I think now that I kind of have a bit of a feel for it, I'd be keen to do it again, but I definitely designate more time to the technical side and the editing side, probably more so than the script and the ideas, because that's where the meaty part of it is.
Well, I was going to ask about the script. Like, was there anything that you left out?
Yeah, I guess a lot of the stuff in SCOM and even I guess general podcast, there's always stuff you have to cut, unfortunately. There are a lot of studies in that I would have liked to put in, but I almost think that having just one core study and a few examples kind of gets to the message a bit quicker and kind of keeps engagement in my mind anyhow, compared to rambling on about facts. And I thought quick and to the point was kind of a better idea for that one in my mind.
I'm reminded of how when you're talking about a scientific concept or idea, to bring in a person to humanize it who probably is either impacted by or might be impacted by research. And they're saying, how that's related to themselves. And also that risks straying into kind of anecdotal evidence that people use for why they make an argument is, well, all of these people say it happens to them. So then it must be true as well. So what do you think is like, how do we find a balance between that lived representation of a concept versus the science part?
I think showing people all parts of the spectrum, showing the empirical evidence as well as the case study, the more, personal feel, I think that creates the best balance. So, you can have a bit of understanding of, a more natural understanding of people's experiences, as well as a bit of facts and evidence without having too much on one or the other and tipping the scale almost, so to say.
Yeah, I guess some people might not identify with the person that's saying this was their lived experience, whereas other people might be like, I don't care about the facts, but this person has said this happens to them, and therefore I'm more likely to kind of listen to what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of an interesting aspect. How do you get psychological research to be communicated without turning it into self-help advice?
That's the struggle, isn't it? Is you got to find the balance. I think that's where the studies come into it, is because you do hear a lot of podcasts all the time, even really top crossing ones that you'd go and you'd find the paper and there's not really a whole lot of evidence to back up what they're saying. A lot of it is just kind of personal, kind of self-help. So I think the main thing is, just to find papers that back it up and kind of have a look at it objectively, as well as, of course, self-help advice is great, but as long as it's supported, as long as you've got evidence for what you're saying, I guess is the main thing. Then you can, self-help as much as you want.
I was interested in, when you're thinking about your audience, what particular things you thought about them that then influenced what you ended up doing.
Definitely having an ATAR audience in mind. I liked the idea of obviously having the was it the Vox Pops they call them? Having 3 student interviews with people their own age, having similar experiences of getting to that age where you're going out, you're playing sports, you're studying for exams, having it be relatable rather than having them sit down and listen and going, this doesn't have anything to do with me. I think those were the main kind of considerations that I put into appeal to that age group anyhow.
And what was your goal for your listeners to kind of come away with? What kind of message?
Definitely, I'd like to lessen the anxiety and mental health effects around exams and, school pressure. I guess the whole thing was, around the whole ATAR and mental health crisis in young students, was to, I guess, communicate in the end how to deal with those negative emotions. But obviously, I couldn't do that without first giving them a bit of knowledge about the self-handicapping as a concept. And only then, once I've explained that with a little bit of evidence and studies, could I then go on to talk about how to, I guess, help it, which was through self-affirmation. Because obviously the whole concept of self-handicapping is to protect yourself from the judgment of others. So I guess I kind of came full circle at the end and kind of left it at that sort of, I didn't go on too long. It kind of came to a close sort of thing. And that's the key message I guess I wanted them to come away with, is to affirm your self-value in things other than academics. It's not the be all and end all. And in the end, kind of ironically, that can help your academics in turn.
Yeah. Did you feel a sense of responsibility in a way to have that kind of solution aspect?
It's one thing that helps. And, it's easy to look back on ATAR now and go, oh, it was a piece of cake, but it definitely wasn't. I would have liked to know something like this when I was going through it, and I'm sure other people would have. So I guess definitely there is a bit of responsibility, looking back and thinking of yourself in their shoes sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you would potentially like making more podcasts. What kind of things would you want to talk about having done this?
I definitely think social psychology kind of lends the best into podcasting, because it's kind of just a general thing that anyone can relate to. That's the whole essence of it, is how people behave in their environments. So it's kind of an easy thing to kind of relate to whatever target audience you want. So I'd probably stick with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't go far off that line, to be honest.
That's pretty cool. Is there anything else that you think that you would like our listeners to take away from after having had our discussion today?
I guess in technical terms is to keep in mind the nitty-gritty parts of podcasting, because I definitely wasn't aware of that. And I think I would have saved myself a lot of time if I was. So I think that, and obviously the whole self-handicapping thing, I think it's remember your self-worth. That's the main thing.
I really like that. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at thepsychomcollective.com. That's com with 2 M's. Questions or comments about today's episode? Get in touch on Instagram at the Psychom Collective.